hopefully you're all here to learn more about becoming community science note editorial board members. So this is something you all should be, pretty familiar with. The Missouri Local Science Engagement Network works to recruit cohorts of scientists from universities and research institutions, AAAS members, and memberships of other science societies to fill a gap of fill a knowledge gap in public policy here in Missouri. We provide ongoing capacity building and guidance in science communications, civic engagement, and effective advocacy. I don't know if you've been a part of our science communication. Someone else just jumped in. Okay, of our science communication and engagements and trainings, but we have that and more coming up on the way. We have an honest broker seminar coming up on the way, so I hope you all are able to join us for that. My goal, and I guess our goal in a nutshell, is to make it easy for Missouri and Midwest scientists to participate in the legislative process by helping to foster relationships with policymakers. This is we use our quorum engagement platform, so generously supplied to us by AAAS, that kind of gives us like our secret superpower to be able to share notes and to engage with policymakers here in Missouri and basically around the country. We also work really hard, Rachel and I, and our other staff to write blogs and that we hope are locally relevant content here in Missouri. We also have a bi-weekly newsletter that we're able to share some of our content with everybody and some of our opportunities to engage with policymakers. The Most Policy Initiative is the main job of the Most Policy Initiative is employing the Most Policy Fellows. There are, I believe there are 5 right now, but that number is growing, fellows in Jefferson City. Their kind of job in a nutshell is to provide information to lawmakers at their request. They testify for informal purposes or through publishing legislative science notes. Rachel chooses the fellows based on their open-mindedness and their willingness to be objective and nonpartisan. They like I said, they write legislative science notes. The legislative science notes are public-facing documents that are requested by Missouri policymakers. First up, the legislative science notes summarize policies in other states that are similar to policies the Missouri General Assembly may be considering. They summarize all the relevant science related to any particular policy, and legislative science notes do not take a political stance on proposed legislation. And this is really important. Because we want to, yeah.
Do you want to hop back to the honest broker slide? I think you slipped
Did I skip it?
But
okay.
This would be a great time to kind of talk about why we use that approach.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly wanted to jump in here. Dan mentioned that we try to be as objective as possible, and we don't take policy stances or make policy recommendations on our legislative science notes. And that's because we're trying to act as honest brokers in the policymaking process. So there's lots of roles scientists can play and should play in the policymaking process. And so this isn't necessarily the only way to go. Issue advocacy is certainly important, but as an organization and something we think lacks right now, especially in Missouri, is this nonpartisan perspective. We spent 3 years developing the fellows program, and in conversations with lawmakers, we found that they really lacked science resources that were coming from sources without an agenda. And so it's very different to have a trusted relationship with a lawmaker and be working with them to provide information from the very beginning of a bill, compared to coming in and telling them to vote yes or no on a bill based on scientific information, when it gets to a point of being voted upon. And so we really try to encourage building relationships and trying to get that information into their hands in a nonpartisan way so that more lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have that information coming to them without an agenda.
And I apologize. It feels like I did skip over a couple of slides. If you just bear with me while Well, okay, I just skipped over that one. Like our legislative fellows in Jefferson City, we have our cohorts of Missouri Local Science Engagement Network members. And we'd also like to enable our membership to write community science notes. So these science notes are real similar to our legislative science notes. They're 1 to 3 page science memos that describe specific principles related to policies or legislation. Each science note features non-biased scientific data and summarizes basic legislation in other states that's similar, and summarizes science that may be proposed to the legislation. The audience for our science note are local and state lawmakers. For example, city council members, state legislatures, certain people of the governing bodies of local county councils and that kind of thing. Community science notes will also be publicly available on the Most Policy website. So we have our legislative science notes publicly available under the Most Policy initiative heading on our website. These will be publicly available under the Missouri Local Science Engagement Network heading on our website. The community science notes differ from the legislative science notes because they are not necessarily requested. I'm relying on our writers to come up with topics. And so what you know, so that's the first difference. Legislative science notes are requested. Community science notes are not necessarily requested. Legislative science notes are specifically about laws being considered by the Missouri General Assembly. Community science notes can be about anything policy relevant in Missouri, from city ordinances to state issues. I don't think we're going to primarily cut out national issues if we really want to write a science note, but please keep it close to home if you choose to write one for us. Like I said, the legislative science notes are written by Most Policy fellows. The community science notes are written by local science engagement network members. We don't share legislative science notes with policymakers in Jefferson City unless they're specifically requested through a process to our fellows. So the fellows hold lots of meetings in Jefferson City, and they may suggest maybe you should request this science note from us, and then it will be shared. Our community science notes will be written by LSN members. As I said, they can be shared with policymakers through social media, through email, through any types of other engagement. If you really feel like it, we have ways that you can print one out and send it in the mail to your favorite policymakers. We have a science note writing process. We like our community science note writers to summarize the relevant legislation in a couple of paragraphs. It's important to us that we identify experts here in Missouri. We think that carries a lot more weight than if you find someone, say, in California who policymakers here in Missouri may not identify with. We like our science notes to conduct a literature review, so summarize all the relevant literature in a couple main paragraphs, and then highlight some main scientific resources and have bullet points. I might also add, please have writers make these visually appealing to the eye, including lots of graphs and pictures if appropriate. A lot of these things help us keep attention and keep eyeballs on these community science notes. So we have 4 main areas of interest at the local science engagement network. Those are climate change, environmental pollution, emerging infectious disease, and health and food disparities. And we kind of think pretty much any topic you want to write a community science note on will probably fit into one of these categories. If you were primarily concerned with climate change, you want to write a science note on climate change. Some ideas for you might be grid reliability, electric grid reliability. Remember in Texas earlier this year, and I guess right now still continuing, they have some grid reliability issues where the electric utilities are actually changing the digital thermostats in people's own homes right now. Weatherization is a big topic for energy efficiency and how we weatherize homes in Missouri. If you want to write about environmental pollution, PFAS chemicals and PFAS seeping into the waterways are a big topic in many states, and we kind of think that this might come up in the Missouri legislature soon. Here in downtown Kansas City, where I live, lead pipes are a huge issue. I assume the same is true in the urban core in the St. Louis area, where you have pipes that are hundreds of years old, going into people's houses and maybe contaminating their drinking water with lead. Emerging infectious diseases. This is one of those things that kind of overlaps with climate change. Well, at least these ideas are. Zika and West Nile virus are carried by mosquitoes. Climate change is kind of making it more likely that someone in Missouri can be bitten by a mosquito. So same with Lyme disease. Lyme disease is on the rise here in Missouri. There are more days that ticks are active in Missouri because of climate change. So this is one area where emerging infectious diseases and climate change overlap. For example, if Senator out in Southeast Missouri asked one of our legislative fellows, "Hey, we have a rise in Lyme disease in our area. Do you have any science? What's up with that?" Well, we can have our fellows, dig through our community science notes and say, okay, well, we got these community science notes already written on Zika and West Nile virus. I can get you some science pronto. I can have that ready for you right now. Health and food disparities is a big one here in Missouri. If you drive an I-70 between St. Louis and Kansas City, you'll see a million billboards, I'm sure, but a lot of them are for like Delta 8 THC and kratom, which I'm not really sure what those things are, but they seem to be important policy issues in many other states. Here in Kansas City, as I'm sure is similarly true in St. Louis, urban farming is a big thing. That's another issue that has overlap in pollution and climate change as well. Also, emerging infectious diseases. If people are able to grow their own food and in downtown Kansas City or downtown St. Louis, then maybe they have easier access to healthier and fresher foods. So we also have a community science note review process. First, I would like anybody considering writing a community science note to first talk to me about the topic, and we'll try to discuss an angle that is policy relevant to somewhere here in Missouri. Second, we write the science note. We also have a format for science notes that we will share at a later date, but they're largely going to look pretty much the same as our legislative science notes, just with a different logo at the top. And this is where we all come in. We are hoping to grow our community science note editorial board from people like you and some of the most staff, including the most fellows, Rachel and I, will help man that editorial board. We'll finalize the science note after a peer review process, and then we can share the science note. So one of the ways we share it is through our quorum engagement platform. We have ways for it. Does someone have a question? Okay, that was some weird audio artifact on my part. Okay, we can share the science note through our quorum engagement platform. That makes it easy for us to share a link to the science note and summarize the bullet points, say in an email to your state representative or state senator, or your your local mayor. We can share it with them too. It's pretty easy to do. And we can document any requests for relevant information, in which case they would become moved from community science notes to legislative science notes. We have a process for community science notes, excuse me, moving to legislative science notes. First, we'll have the author work with the most policy fellow to revise the science notes. So if we write something on mosquitoes and Zika virus here in Missouri, right now in 6 months, that science might change. So we might have new research come down the pipeline that really has an updated view of the landscape in Missouri for emerging diseases, and so we might need to revise that science notes. We will have the community science note peer reviewed through our legislative science note process, and we will share that. We'll have the opportunity to share with lawmakers via public testimony. So if you write community science note and it becomes a legislative science note, there may be an opportunity for you to appear in front of a legislative committee and present some of your science findings through public testimony. So we have some expectations for the editorial board. So not all these are really set in stone right now, but we hope the editorial board will be a multidisciplinary team of scientists and researchers in Missouri. The editorial board's work will help promote the use of science and science policy through reviewing submitted community science notes. We will need help identifying topics for community science notes. I would expect our editorial board to help us reach out to potential science note authors and attract submissions. If you're a professor at a university, maybe you have a grad assistant or one of your PhD students who is really into science policy, who you think might be a good author for one of these science notes. So, hooking me up with them and, going through these steps would help them, be involved in science policy. We would also hope that our editorial board will help promote the local science engagement network through this way. Community science as editorial board term. Right now, I'm thinking it'll be a 2-year term with an option to extend. So let's say you're a grad student and you're defending your thesis in 18 months. I'm not going to come banging on your door once you graduate and say, here's a stack of science notes I need you to look over and peer review. But if you do want to join and you can't help us out with the 2-year term, do help us identify a replacement for you. So I hope that our editorial board comes away with something for their CV on this. I know that Rosie just entered the room. She is the editor-in-chief of the JSPG, the Journal of Science Policy and Governance, and they have. She told me they have some difficulty finding people who have experience peer reviewing scholarly documents. So maybe this is one of the ways where we can work with journals like JSPG and kind of be one of those ways for people to prepare for professional development, for being a peer reviewer and reviewing policy relevant documents. And with that, I'm sorry, I went through that way quicker than I thought I was going to. Does anybody have any questions? I will stop sharing the screen. And let me know if you have any questions.
Well, I'm Bill Folk. I'm a professor of biochemistry at MU. I want to commend you and Rachel and others for doing this. I think it's really needed. And I want to help. don't think I can provide the time, and we can discuss at another point how much time I can provide and in what way. But this has really been informative. And as I mentioned in an email, and perhaps best discussed offline, I teach a course in the Honors College here at MU in which students develop science policy proposals, evidence-based science policy proposals that I think some of which that have been developed in the recent past might be candidates for the Community Science Board or newsletter, and others as we go forward. Certainly, I'd be anxious to try to shape the course so that the students are actually intentionally working to submit papers for the Community Science Board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. Right now, I'm not sure how much of a time commitment this is going to be. I don't foresee it really to be a real huge time commitment for many people. If I were to guess how many community science notes are going to come to us weekly, for right now, I don't think it's going to be that many. As we get this going more, as it becomes maybe more popular, as Professor Folk has more students submitting community science notes, maybe that's a greater opportunity for us to get busier and for other people to join in. But hopefully, if we have enough people on the editorial board, I can break it down, have a medical science team or an environmental science team to help review some of these. But that said, I think it's also important to have a multidisciplinary group to look at things from many different angles.
Yeah, and in general, if you're interested in the writing side of things, we generate a lot of ideas within our team. So this idea originally came up during the legislative session because there's a lot of bills related to science and technology that we can't cover either because of time or because lawmakers aren't requesting information from us. So like this year, we didn't do anything on COVID just because we didn't get any requests related to those bills, but they would have been, certainly bills that we could have had science introduced into the conversation from our organization or from the LSEN members on those topics. But then there's also, every other week, the Secretary of State's office releases public comment opportunities for the state. City governments usually meet year round and are constantly considering different types of legislation. So like there's the Kansas City police funding bill that's our ordinance that's going through right now. St. Louis is considering some different technologies that they're having a hearing on here in a few weeks. And so there's a lot of different topics and we can help generate those ideas, but we also are interested in hearing about just general topics that you have that are policy relevant. So it's really, there's like an endless scope of things that we could probably be working on. This is just a start with trying to get this off the ground and trying to engage more of our community science members who are interested in writing and reviewing these notes.
Good.
All right, we got a question from the chat from Brooke. Here as an MU alumni and current PhD at Emory, I do similar work with our GA sister organization, Science for Georgia. Oh, that's one of our partner organizations through AAAS. Curious if you have intentions on sharing science notes with each other, or at least when it pertains to shared relevant topics. I mean, that's a really good question. And I think it's not something we've talked about with our partner organizations, but it's something that we should talk about. And I can't see any reason why we can't share a science note, or at least let them update our science notes for say the Georgia or Colorado situations. I don't see why that's not possible or feasible or actually a really good idea. Thanks, Brooke. I really appreciate that. So we have sister organizations in Georgia and Colorado. Those are the most mature at this point. We have ones popping up in what was Rachel, Maine?
Just Maine right now.
Yeah, it's Maine. New Mexico and Idaho are also possibilities from last I heard. But I think AAAS is working to help promote organizations like the one we're in right now across many other U.S. states. So the possibilities to share between states are kind of endless at this point, and it's something I hope we do. And I'll bring it up at our next meeting. We meet at a regular basis with Colorado and Georgia.
Hi, I have a question.
Hey, Nancy.
So I'm going to be fifth year this coming academic year, and I would like to serve on editorial board. But you said that there's a 24 months commitment.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping to graduate next May, so I won't be able to commit for full 2 years. If that's the case, will I still be able to be a part of it?
I mean, it's a good question. Yeah, like I said, if you if you're graduating in 18 months and you don't want to do the full 2-year commitment, I wouldn't turn you away. But I do, if you do want to commit to serving on the editorial board, everyone here has their own connections at your home institutions where you are, and maybe you know someone who would be really great at taking your spot. So
yeah, I'm happy to help you to find replacement. Right. And yeah, I can see that some of the students in not in my cohort, but in my program, they're a little bit younger right now, but like maybe in a couple of years they will pass their comps and become like PhD candidate. They may have like more knowledge about certain content area that they might be interested in this opportunity. Yeah,
and like I said, if you wanted to commit for 2 years and a year or 6 months from now you think, oh my gosh, this is too much work that I've my life and everything, then by all means I'm not gonna come knocking on your door. But I know if you want to, I know a lot of people, if they want to go work professionally for a journal, that's why I make it 2 years. They like people to have 2 years experience.
Yeah, sure. So I'm more interested in serving on the editorial board rather than writing community science notes on my own. Right. Not that I don't enjoy writing community notes, but because my area is social science, like I work with family and children, and my guess is that it might be requested less often compared to some traditional STEM field. Community and science notes. But I'm also a PhD student. I can definitely help people to look through things and just to contribute, to give a little bit different kind of perspective, like as an outsider, like, do I understand this community or science note or not, as someone who doesn't have like chemistry or biology background. And if I can understand, then other people who are not from this field might be able to understand the language as well. So I think that might be helpful.
So I wouldn't call social sciences a blind spot for us, but it's definitely one place where we do need to strengthen ourselves, Nancy. So but by all means, send social scientists our way. We consider them scientists and researchers the same we would a nuclear physicist.
Yeah, sure. But I don't know if state legislators at Missouri view it that way, or like how often they request things related to family and children.
I bet at least 40% of our science notes this year were related to social sciences, between education, children, families, like social services type topics. So we actually get a surprising amount of requests in social sciences. As far as like things going on at the local level, I don't know if we'd like generate as many ideas about local topics, but at the state legislative level, we get a lot of requests.
Okay, all right, well, great to hear.
Yeah. And being on the editorial board, maybe one of our fellows might reach out to you for help writing a legislative science note as well.
Yeah, that's another thing. This could really, so we wrote 80 science notes this last year with 5 legislative fellows over a 5-month period of time. And we were like at capacity. That was also without being in Jefferson City at the Capitol. And so right now in our legislative science note review process, it has to go through, so like the fellow writes it, 2 other fellows have to review it, and then it has to go through me for the final version before it gets sent to a lawmaker. And sometimes that turnaround, like that whole review process, writing and review process, happens in like 4 days. And so in general, increasing the capacity of reviewers. So if you're even able to like read something quick, pick out any potential partisan language or any blind spots that we have during the legislative session, I think that that could also be a role for this community editorial board during the legislative session with the legislative science notes.
Sarah, I see you have a raised hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I have a question about the review process. So how thorough is the review of these community science notes? So is it like basically like a yes, no, or is it more like, could you provide more information on this, like another paragraph on this? Could you, rework this paragraph to be more clear? Is it more like that?
Yeah, more of the latter. So my view is we'll work a lot with Google Docs. If you've ever worked on a paper in a group with Google Docs, it's easy to put comments on the corner and easy to track changes and things like that. So yeah, that's largely how we do our legislative science note review process. Is everybody takes a look and says, hey, maybe you could explain this more, or hey, yeah, here's another thing to consider for this certain aspect.
Yeah, we really also try to highlight when we read through that, like try to make sure that they're not saying that something is like a causal relationship when it's actually a correlation, making sure that we're not like stepping outside the bounds of what the science says based on your, familiarity with the topic. And then also just highlighting a lot of, when I review the fellows science notes, it's oftentimes, oh, this is a really interesting point, but it's really not clear what you're talking about. Can you like clarify this sentence? Or this leads me to this other question that a lawmaker might have about this topic. And then so we ask all those in the comments in Google Docs or in like a Microsoft Word, and then how we document peer review. So we don't like go through and like, make a separate document with the revisions and things like that, like in a typical peer review process, but we do respond in comment and then resolve the comments once the writer answers those, just so that way we have documentation of actually going through the peer review process.
And if anybody wants to see, if anybody wants to see more about our legislative science notes, a minute ago, I put the link to that page in the chat. We do have one community science note that has been peer reviewed up on our site, but it's just one. The legislative science notes are very similar, and there are more than 80 of them. So you can pick your favorite and kind of see what those are all about.
How do you? I was just looking at the site, and I didn't see exactly how to get back to the legislative science notes or the community science notes. What tab do you go through?
Okay, I need to go to the site to look at it myself. So if you go to find if you find to find the legislative science notes, you'll go under policy initiatives, which is kind of everything where we keep everything under that tab to do with our legislative fellows. If you go to local science network, you can scroll down and find community science notes. Right now, there is one community science note on crayfish, which are maybe a threatened species in Missouri. We asked people to get on our quorum platform and share the science note with the was it the Department of Wildlife or Forest Department or something like that, who was considering putting two endemic Missouri crayfish on an endangered species list.
Yes, that was an example of like a federal public comment. It was U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they listed the public comment in like the federal register, but it's specifically retaining to Missouri, and so that's why we worked on that one. Mm-hmm. I think Hannah has a question in the chat about if you have to be a Missouri resident or if we would take Missouri alums on the editorial board. And I think that we'd be happy to take Missouri alums. I think some familiarity with the state would be wonderful. But at the same time, I think, we could use more people writing and reviewing these notes. And so as long as you have that perspective, I don't think we're too concerned about it.
And the way I always tell people is like the state lines for the Missouri Science and Technology Policy Initiative, insofar as it is concerned with the local science engagement network. The state lines are very fuzzy. So, well, I don't know how many miles will go into Illinois, or how many miles will go into Kansas, but you can't have St. Louis without Illinois, and you can't have Kansas City without Kansas. So we welcome and accept members from like SIU Carbondale, which is a big research institution. We welcome and accept members from University of Kansas and maybe Kansas State. Those are typically, those are very close to Kansas City. So
even happy to do some work in Topeka and Springfield if we need to.
Absolutely.
Always up for the challenge of learning about new state legislatures.
But anybody else have any questions? If not, everybody's dropping off for lunch. Feel free to drop off if you want to catch up with me offline. Send me an email. Happy to answer any questions, or if you just want to stick around after everybody leaves, I'll be here for you. Rachel will be here for you for a couple minutes. But otherwise, thank you for checking out our presentation, and I'll email the video of this to everyone who RSVP'd interest. At least I know not everybody was able to attend. I know it's a random Tuesday in June, so thank you all for being here. But hey, here for any questions. Let me know.
Hey, Dan, I was just looking at the website of a community science node, and I just have a very specific question given my scenario, because I see that you have like a health and food system disparities section, and that says coming soon. And currently I'm working on a policy analysis project on maternal health disparities, and it kind of overlap a little bit with what Jill already did last December for a science note. And I'm working on the policy analysis project, and if anything come up from that project, I can see it can be relevant to your health and food system disparities section. So I just wanted to keep you posted.
Yeah, we would super welcome that for sure.
Yeah, but then it might overlap like to a certain extent with what Jill already published.
I don't know. How do you feel about that, Rachel? About having overlap? I don't see it as a big issue.
Yeah, I think the only thing with that, so we could always do like a revised maternal health disparities. We could like focus in more on what the note is specifically about. If it's, instead of maternal health disparities in general, if you are, focused in on a more
I focus on postpartum depression.
Oh yeah, then we could focus in on that, I think. Also, there's one of the state senators has a standing request out for a postpartum depression note. And so we could probably turn it into a legislative science note pretty easy as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not my research training field, but it's just something I'm interested by collaborating with Jill last year. So I'm just learning more about it and see some like racial disparity and also like mothers' access of resources in rural versus metropolitan areas of Missouri. So that's what my project's kind of focusing on.
And I wouldn't worry about if it's your research training field or not. I mean, we have our fellows working on, was it Josh who is a neuroscience by training, and he worked on broadband. So, I mean, our skills as scientists to be able to research and write objectively are more important than maybe your research area of expertise. Although we do need stuff from your research area of expertise. Yeah,
sure. It will be easier to write things that I'm already trained on compared to something like public health area that I'm self-training myself on.
Right. Yeah. I think the hardest thing to do is to make these like 2 to 3 to 4 pages. I think all of ours are 3 to 4 pages. It's really hard to condense a lot of this information, but we need to make it, give it like bite size and make it like kind of 8th grade reading material level, because not a lot of Missouri legislators have a background in any kind of STEM field at all. And the same is true for local and county leaders.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I just want to toss my idea over there.
Say it again, Sarah.
I was going to say, if you go forward with the maternal health disparities, that's actually one thing my lab focuses on. So I'd be interested in getting in on that, either helping write it or decide.
Yeah.
My
Sarah,
internet's
I
pretty
can-
bad, so there's probably a big lag.
Sarah, I can introduce you to Nancy
And
after this goes, so you can share some email.
cool, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for holding the meeting. It was very informative.
Yeah, thank you for showing up. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.